Year 9, this is the fourth lesson in the series of lessons about the Holocaust, and this time we're going to look at how the Holocaust impacted on a particular individual, and that individual is Anne Frank. Okay, so who was Anne Frank? She was born in Germany, her family were Jewish, and they'd lived in Frankfurt all their lives. In 1933, Adolf Hitler becomes the Chancellor of Germany, and as we already know, he blamed many of Germany's problems on the Jews, so he made life very difficult and dangerous for them. So Otto Frank, Anne Frank's father, decides to move his family to Holland, where they're going to be safer. But that happiness and that safety doesn't last for very long, because Holland's invaded in May 1940. So just as we saw all those anti-Jewish laws being brought into German life, they were brought into Dutch life in Holland as well. So Anne's sister gets a letter telling her to report to a labour camp as a worker, but her family have sort of heard rumours. They know that things are not right, and that they're very worried that if she does go, they're not going to see her again. So Otto Frank makes the decision of taking the family into hiding. So along with his business partner in the premises where he used to work, they decide that they're going to hide in the secret attic or annex or separate building up above the factory, or the offices rather, where they work, where Otto Frank used to work. So Anne takes her diary, which has been given to her as a birthday present, before they go into hiding, and into the hiding place they go, and to stop people thinking that it's that there is a secret apartment behind it. The door, in front of the door, is nailed on a bookcase, so when the door is closed it looks like it's a flat wall without a door. So they hide for more than 2 years, and she wants to go out, she wants to see her friends, but they have to be quiet in the day, and they know that other Jews are being taken away or being killed by the Nazis. Finally, on Friday the 14th of August, their luck runs out, and the Nazis find their hiding place. So they don't know who informed on them, or who told on them. They still don't know to this day, but the Nazis offered people money, so they, it made it worth their while for people to report if Jews were in hiding, or inform on them. So Anne's sent to Auschwitz, which is a death camp in Poland, but she manages to get through that, but her and her sister are moved to another camp back in Germany, because as the Nazis were losing the war, they started to move a lot of the surviving Jewish prisoners back into Germany. So one of the camps, Bergen Belsen, there was little food or water, plenty of disease, and there were dead bodies lying around everywhere, and therefore a disease called typhus was very common and made a lot of people sick and caused a lot of people to die. So in March 1945, Anne died of disease and hunger, and she was only 15 years old. And it was only a few days before, or a few weeks before, the camp was liberated or freed by the British. So the only member of the family to survive is Mr. Frank, is Otto Frank. He goes back, and Miet Gies, who's one of the ladies who was helping them to hide, has got hold of her diary and has kept it to give back to Anne, hoping that she's going to return at the end of the war, but she doesn't, so she gives it to Mr. Frank, and he has it published. He wants others to know how difficult it's been during the war, and hopefully people will learn never to let it happen again. Okay, so the first task you're going to do is to create a timeline. So you've done timelines before in humanities, and basically you are putting all of those dates and those pieces of information into chronological order. So date order from the earliest date to the latest date, and how you choose to do that is up to you. You can do it on computer if you prefer to do that, or you can do it by hand in your book or on a piece of paper. So it'd probably be a good idea to pause the video here now and then do this first task. Okay, so moving on. These slides now will give you just a bit more information about Anne Frank and about what happened to her. And you're going to use these slides as well as the previous ones, and there are going to be some questions at the end of these slides. So we know that Otto Frank, Anne's father, was German by birth and Jewish by religion. He'd fought in the First World War, like a lot of Jewish Germans had, very bravely, and he was Hitler turning around and saying that it was the Jews' fault, or Jewish people's fault, that Germany had lost the First World War, so he was blaming them for that. So, as we know, he moves his family to Holland to be free of these restrictions that the Nazis were placing on German Jews. But, as we said before, in 1940, the Germans start occupying Holland. So they take it over, they conquer it. And again, they're making life unbearable for Jews. So Otto Frank decides that his family have got to go into hiding. So Johannes Kleiman, who's his business partner, helps him to hide with his family. And you can see Otto Frank, after the war, standing behind the bookcase there, leading into the secret annex. There were 4 other people who hid. Anne calls them something different in her diary. She calls Mr. and Mrs. Van Pels the Van Dans and the son Peter Van Dam, but actually in real life their names were Mr. and Mrs. Van Pels. And then there's a dentist, and she calls him Mr. Dussel in her diary, and actually, so she gives them assumed names, so perhaps if they're looking over her shoulder when she was writing the diary, they wouldn't know that she was writing about them. So she calls the dentist Mr. Dussel, and his real name was Fritz Pfeffer. So there are 8 of them hiding in this secret attic or secret annex. And there's a picture, sort of cross section of the secret annex. So there's the entrance going in through the false bookcase, false door, and then you go up. So there's some rooms down here, and then there's a further room on the next floor. And this is the sort of bird's eye view plan of each of the floors of the secret annex. So none of those living in the annex could leave it as long as the Nazis were in Holland. Everything they needed had to be smuggled in by the 4 people who knew they were there. So that's Mr. Kleiman, who owns the business, and then Leap Gies, Victor Kugler, and Elizabeth Vosburg. These 4 risked their lives by helping the people in hiding by bringing them food, because if they'd have been caught, they could also have been sent to a work camp or a concentration camp, or they could have been shot. They were taking their lives in their own hands, really helping. None of the other people working in the offices knew the Franks or the other 4 people were hiding there, so during the day they have to be really quiet. They can't flush the toilet, they can't turn taps on, they've got to keep quiet, because, as I said before, the Nazis would pay large amounts of money to Dutch people who informed on Jews in hiding. So just a month before the Franks go into hiding, Anne is given a diary as a 13th birthday present. So she calls her diary Kitty, and the entries start with the words Dear Kitty, so it's almost as if she's writing letters to this friend of hers. And as we said, they live in the annex, hide in the annex for over 2 years, but in 1944 somebody informs on them. So the Franks and the other 4 people hiding are discovered and they're arrested. So initially they're taken to Auschwitz, which is the death camp where millions of Jews were killed in Poland. And here Mrs. Frank died of hunger. Anne and her sister, as we know, were sent back to Germany to Belsen, or Bergen Belsen, and they both died of typhus shortly before the camp was liberated and its prisoners freed by the British Army. Peter Van Pels disappears while on a forced march back to Germany. So what they would do, these people were barely alive as it was, but yet because they wanted them, they wanted to get rid of them, but they also wanted to move them away from the advancing Russian army. They marched them or walked them back towards Germany. So often, again, hundreds of people died on those forced marches, so that's probably what happened to him. Otto Frank was the only one of the 8 to survive. He survived Auschwitz and he returned to Amsterdam looking for the others, only to find that they'd all been killed. And when the Franks were arrested and taken away, the Gestapo, the Nazi police, went through everything. They're turning everything out, pulling everything out, looking for valuables that they can keep, things that they can take. And Anne's diary is thrown on the floor. So meet Geese, who's left there after the Franks have been taken. Luckily, she wasn't taken herself for trying to help them. And she finds this diary on the floor. She picks it up. She keeps it safe. She's hoping Anne will return and she can give it back to her. So when Otto returns on his own, she gives the diary to him. He reads the diary, makes a copy of it, and then he shows it to friends, and they read it and they say, look, this is an amazing thing. It's a human document. You should publish it. You should let the world know what happened, how Jews were treated, and try and make people realise what can happen when a group of people are subjected to prejudice and hatred. The other thing about it was that Anne had always wanted to be a writer, so when Otto published her book, this wish was granted after her death. And even though she died, her voice, and millions of people around the world have read the book, they know about her, and her voice continues long after her death. Okay, so you're going to answer the following questions. This is task 2 again. You could type it up onto a Word document if you want to do that and email it to me, or you could write it in your book or on a piece of paper. So the first question is, where in Germany did the Franks originally live? So go back and look at the information on the slides and to help you answer the question. Why did the Franks move to Holland? What did Anne call her diary? Where did the Frank family hide and who else was with them? What piece of furniture hid the staircase to the hiding place? What happened to the Franks and Peter van Pels after they were arrested? Why do you think Otto Frank decided to publish Anne's diary? And there's a couple of reasons for that, so you should be able to write a short paragraph on that. What do you think would have been the most difficult thing about a life of hiding in the secret annex? Again, that should be an extended answer. A short paragraph. What would have been the most difficult? And explain why you think it would have been the most difficult thing. Why do you think Anne Frank's diary has sold millions of copies and is seen as such an important book? Why is it so important to people? Why have millions of people read it? Okay, so do that task and pause it for now and then move on. Okay, so task 3, you're going to use the information on the slides and create a storyboard on the life of Anne Frank. This storyboard frame is in publisher form in the classroom materials file. So if you have publisher at home, you could do it straight on there. Otherwise, there is a PDF version also in class materials, so you will need to print that off because you can't type directly onto it or put pictures directly onto it. So you'd have to write on it, or equally you could create your own storyboard without this frame into your book or on a piece of paper and do it like that. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so that's task 3. And then the final task is to create a script for a report to camera or a documentary about Anne Frank. So as if you'd be telling the story of Anne Frank for the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam, which is still open today and people can go and visit it. And they can see the annex where Anne Frank was in hiding, and there's also the original diary is there for people to see. So you could do a bit of extra research and find a little bit about the house as a museum today in Amsterdam. Or if you want to be a bit more adventurous, you could create a documentary using Photo Story, so you could use that, or Movie Maker if you know how to use that, or iMovie or something like that, that allows you to create a little documentary. Okay, so that's the final task. So this series of tasks should take more than, I would say, one lesson. So probably talking 2, possibly 3 lessons to cover all of this work. Okay, so take your time, stop and pause and go through each one.